Hi, welcome to this SQL tutorial video, and today we're going to talk about the options when commenting your code. So what you should do when you're writing any code in any language, you should put comments as much as you can, so that if you're not about and somebody else looks at your code, the comments will tell them what your code is doing at each step, if it's not obvious. So on screen I've got a pretty straightforward piece of code. For this example, I mean it's only 28 lines long, but this could be thousands of lines long, and in which case the more comments the better, in order to fully understand and appreciate what it's doing. So the default way of adding a comment is to put 2 dashes before a piece of text, and if I just put a piece of valid SQL here, select star from person addresses. Oh, is it just address? It's a piece of SQL, but if I prefix it, and you'll see you've got the blue and the black, the colours that are supposed to appear when it's a recognised bit of SQL. If I prefix it with 2 dashes, it becomes a comment, and it's no longer a piece of SQL that if I press the execute button, this would no longer be executed. So anything that is prefixed with these 2 dashes, SQL will ignore and assume it is a comment. Now, if I just unselect that, there are comment buttons here. So at the top here, you've got the option to comment and uncomment. And if I just, with this line selected, if I press the comment button, it'll do what I did before with the 2 dashes. And if I press the uncomment button, it takes the 2 dashes off. Now that works with, if I just get rid of that, if I were to highlight these 4 lines and press the comment button, it will comment each of the 4 lines and equally will uncomment them. So anything that I highlight and press comment, it will comment those lines. So now that I've commented just 2 of the 4 of this little block here, I've now broken this bit of SQL, so I'll just uncomment that. So by default, if you use the SQL comment option here, it will add 2 dashes. Now, if I just put my SQL back in, so I showed that I can run that piece of SQL. If I were to put a comment, all it means is if I run the SQL using this execute button, if I run the whole lot, this bit will be ignored because it's prefixed by these 2 dashes. However, if I were to highlight just that select and not the 2 dashes here, even though it's green and SQL generally now sees it as a comment, when I press this execute button, it will only execute the highlighted portion of my SQL. So right now, if I were to execute that, it will see the 2 dashes and see everything else as a comment on that line. So if I execute that. But if I were to highlight just the SQL, I can still run it. So if I highlight the particular SQL extract, even though it's green and within a comment, it'll still allow it to run in this case. Now then, there are kind of trip ups with this sort of thing. So let's imagine we put it onto 2 lines here and we comment out those 2 lines. Now if I highlight that, that's not going to work because SQL will see select star as a valid entry, but the from person.address is prefixed by the 2 dashes, so it will see that as a comment. So it won't work in that way, but if all on one line, if you highlight that without any dashes, it'll recognize it as a piece of SQL regardless of it being green and recognize it as a comment. So with that in mind, I've got my SQL here and it will run. If I just execute this, it does what I want it to do. And what it does is, if I read my comments, creates a table variable, creates a variable called @city. It then uses this piece of code here to get the most common city in my person.address table, and then output that city name to my city variable. Then it says insert into my table variable the result of this select here, which is getting address line 1, 2 in city, where the city has been populated above here, and then it outputs it. So if I run this, the city, the most common city, must have been London, because that's kind of what's happened at the SQL, when it's all run. So if I want then to just to prove that this value equals London rather, I can add a line in here and just say select @city. And what this will do is it will run all of this SQL again, but here it will output the variable value, and then it will output the table variable values. So if I just run that again, there's London and there's our output. So we're happy that it kind of works. And then I can then comment that out and run this again, and it will ignore that line and it will just output the address table. So comments are very handy to include descriptions of each bit of your code, but they're also quite handy when it comes to kind of error handling or just proving certain bits and pieces. So if I were to run this, this wouldn't work because @city is not a recognized variable in that selected block. So because it's declared here, but I've only highlighted this little bit, that declaration hasn't been executed as part of this highlighted SQL, so it won't work in that way. Let us think then, let me just grab this bit of SQL here. Let me imagine I want to output this value here. I want to see how many of the top city there are, how many entries for it. So if I run that, then it says, all right, yeah, London's the most common, and there's 434 entries for that. Okay, I can then comment that out, as I did with the other, and I can run it, and it will just all run fine. And if I uncomment that, then that will run, oops, fine as well. So if I want to be able to run this every now and again, if I were to highlight it here, and then if I try and run it, as I showed before, that won't run because of these dashes that are breaking the second, third and fourth line. So I don't want to comment it in this way. So the other way to do it is to do this. So any text that you surround with a /* will become a comment. It's exactly the same as me prefixing everything with the 2 dashes, but there is a subtle difference. So if I just run this SQL now, it will ignore that bit of text within the comment. But because I have commented it as a block rather than each individual line, it means at any point I can highlight that and I can execute it. But within the whole root of this SQL, it is seen to be a comment. Now that's quite handy. So let us say that we want to add comments within our SQL. So let's say that for test purposes, we want to, instead of using our city variable, we want to use a different variable. I might have some values in mind, and I'll put them in comments. So I'll put Birmingham, Paris. Now, if I run my SQL, it'll run fine because Birmingham, Paris are a prefix rather with the 2 dashes, so they are seen as comments, and there they are green. But what it means is I can just get rid of that and nice and quickly just paste that in there, run my SQL, and it just kind of means that I can quite quickly switch my variables and just look at some values for testing purposes. That's quite neat. So you can put comments here, I don't know, line added today's date. Maybe you want to just put extra information to say that the code has been changed for this purpose, but you want to add it at the end of the line to be very specific about what's happened. So that's quite nice. You can do that. In some cases, maybe you've got a piece of code that had extra entries in that you want to comment out. So maybe we will remove address line 2 from our table variable here. So now our variable, when it runs, it's only got 2 columns, address line 1 and city. So I want to comment out address line 2, but I don't want, I've got to be careful because I don't want to kind of lose it as such. I just want to comment it out while I run a couple of tests. So in this case, I can, there's no point in me doing this, because if I put 2 dashes, it will get rid of the city column here. I mean, there's other ways of doing it, but what you could do, if it suits, is you can surround that little tiny bit with the comments that I showed you here, the star / / star. If I run that, it will now only deal with address 1 and city, because that is now a comment. I think that's all I wanted to say about comments. I mean, I hope that makes sense. I hope it's helpful. As always, any queries or questions, please drop me a message. Thanks a lot for your time. See you next time.